Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tome Raider. This is a new thing we're doing, where me and Dan Murgy, how you doing, Dan?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, I'm good. We quite like writing and books and the like, so we thought, why not start a show where we talk about that? And I thought it would be fun for us to go through the Sherlock Holmes stories. So that's what we're doing today, the first one of those. Why do I sound like I don't know what tone that was meant to be, but
An attempt at a fireside chat tone, I think.
yeah, I think the crackling fire gif is throwing me off slightly. I'm not used to this aesthetic.
Yeah. No,
Oh, and the Twitch category did not arbitrarily change itself. It seems like if you do it through Restream, it will do it right.
huzzah! It is working.
Every stream for what must be a couple of months now, it's been saying I've been playing Assassin's Creed Origins, and we haven't touched that game since August of 2023.
Yes, that's how long Valhalla was after that.
Uh,
Yeah. But yes, we are here to discuss literature.
yes,
Probably
us.
more civilized than in a more civilized way than most people who discuss literature. They've just
us.
got these sorts of like huge arguments in pubs with like between Tolkien and Carroll about their works.
Oh,
And
one of
and
my
why
favourite stories is
Sally,
how Tolkien and C.S. Lewis almost fell out over the inclusion of Santa Claus in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
yep. Yeah,
uh,
that was the bit that was step too far, not the lion who was Jesus, basically.
yeah.
But the fact Santa was in Narnia.
Yeah. So, Dan, you did a degree in creative writing, didn't you?
Yes, and English literature. So
Yeah. This
this should be
is
a good bit for me.
yes, this is very much in your wheelhouse. Mine was in performing arts, followed by a master's in performance practices, which is tangentially related. I've always had a particular love of literature as a medium. Never.
Yep, and
Sorry.
you read faster than I do by a long way.
Well, I've experimented into speed reading specifically because I have a lot I want to read and I can only focus for short periods at a time.
And life is not long enough for all the books you want to read. In
Indeed.
like, yeah,
Yeah. So, I probably should have put the title of the book we're discussing on the thing. Anyway, I think I can hear both of us, which is the only important thing here.
yeah. And there's no game audio to worry about this time.
Yeah, no, indeed. So, a study in Scarlet. First and foremost, just ballpark musings. Dan, what did you think of the book, the story?
I enjoyed it. It wasn't quite what I was expecting because, of course, it is near impossible to avoid having been exposed to the meta perception of what Holmes and Watson are like, and the media that has spun off from the novels and also the meta perception. And
Mm,
so going into it and seeing what they are actually like, which is Watson, okay, Watson sitting there stunned seems to be a common trend in all of them, but
yeah,
he's not as idiotic as he is sometimes portrayed in other mediums.
which you would hope so, as he is a doctor.
Yes, or to borrow from the special in Sherlock season 3. I am a military doctor. I can break every bone in your body while naming them.
That is probably one of the better lines. I I enjoyed Sherlock when it aired, but I find I like it less the more I think about it. And
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
sorry.
I was going to say I've not gone back to it in a while. I was thinking of watching A Study in Pink before this, and then just could not bring myself to face it.
No, um, I forgot to turn the VPN off.
Of course, there's always one thing.
uh, okay, it doesn't seem to have affected the stream.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. That
so let's just cross our fingers and hope for the best. Anyway, yeah, I also quite enjoyed this story, and quite a bit more than A Study in Pink, I dare say. Um, I found it surprising that, well, part two of the story, which we'll come to, ended up being my favourite part of it.
yes. Where it would have been a bit of a whiplash moment for a lot of people, including myself. It's just like,
Yeah.
wait, why are we here?
I initially stopped reading at that point, and I figured that must be a separate story. Uh, but then I kept going for a bit. And it's like, oh, as soon as you know, oh God, why am I not wording today? As soon as the caravan comes up to save, um, oh, what's
Jefferson Hope.
yeah, no, Jefferson
Um,
Hope is the
no, Ferriers,
uh,
John Ferrier and
John
Lucy.
Farrier, John and
Yeah,
Lucy. As soon as the caravan comes up to save John and Lucy, I sort of guessed what this was. And it's like, oh, I imagine Jefferson Hope is going to show up at some point. And I initially thought he was going to be one of the Mormons. But no,
yeah,
no. And yeah, I really did enjoy this story, though I don't know how you would adapt it in another medium, especially given the what is essentially a villain origin story. Well, I would characterize, well, we'll come to this, but I would characterize Jefferson Hope as an anti-villain because, like, he's not the bad guy here.
yes. That is a talk for later on when we get more into the characters.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um.
that
Well, I mean, obviously he is the bad guy here, but like, you know what I mean.
yeah.
Um. So, let's start at the beginning.
Here it's a good place to start.
Yes, yes, I have been told. So, Watson is the obviously the point of view character through whom we experience the world and by extension Holmes. And he's just been returned to England from Afghanistan after suffering a war wound and then coming down with all manner of things.
Yes, a fever, a disease which I believe we have managed to eradicate mostly.
Yeah.
He got that after taking a shot to the left shoulder, which apparently shattered the bone, and and then a long journey back that took a month that did no good, ruined his health irreparably.
Irreparably.
Let us leave it at that and abandon the word I cannot say.
Irreparably.
Yes, that one. And then he decided to live in a hotel for a while.
Yeah, which I imagine would have been cheaper even relatively back then.
Yes, but still a hotel in London. It's a bit more than the army was paying him,
Yeah.
which is the plot point that had him, while making these bad financial decisions, uh, had him bump into Stanford.
Yeah, his old colleague and up to this point, my one point of reference for adaptations, the BBC show Sherlock, adapts it relatively closely.
Yes, Indeed, they adapted it twice because they redid it in the season 3 special. The
Abominable Bride.
yes, the
Hmm,
Abominable Bride. It was,
yeah.
I was stuck on the Abominable Woman because that blooming video you did got in my head again.
Oh, yeah. I because I found the inflections amusing, I did a 10-minute loop of Roger Moore's James Bond and Una Stubbs' Mrs. Hudson going, a woman, back and forth for about 10 minutes.
Yeah,
When I'm bored, I well, post
make
random things.
yes, make random things. It's how this and Assassin Sunday both came to be. Bored, and we did, and they allowed us to spend time.
Yeah, yeah. And, well, there have been worse ways to create things. Anyway, so Watson goes to meet Holmes, and the way Stamford talks about him, I really like, because, you know, it doesn't. One of the things I didn't like about, and I'm sorry I keep comparing it to this, but it is just my main point of comparison. One of the things I didn't like so much about the Benedict Cumberbatch version of Sherlock Holmes is it was that trope of the clever person is also thoroughly unpleasant to be around. And it's like
Yeah,
I I don't like that. And I'm trying to avoid swearing and calling him things um because that would
yeah,
be my usual vernacular. We are going to try and rein in the language for these things, but no promises. But I just really don't like that whole the genius is an awful person trope.
yes,
Because like well, firstly I just don't think it rings true, and my description on YouTube is still we have men to hit. I should probably fix that. I'll fix it
yeah,
after.
yes.
Yeah.
We are not hitmanning currently.
No,
The
no.
we may be performing character assassination on the BBC Sherlock.
Well, um, better YouTubers than me have done that already.
Yeah, doesn't stop the dog pile.
uh, uh, I mean, like, if you want a point of reference, Sherlock is garbage, and here's why by H. Guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I must admit, I have actually recently finished a rewatch of the series Elementary, which had Johnny Lee Miller and Lucy Liu as Holmes and Watson, respectively.
I never
And
watched that. I hear it's good.
it is good. There is still a bit of the genius is an unpleasant guy, but unlike Sherlock, across the Elementary, he gets more likable. He forms connections, and you realize a lot of it is put on to distance himself and to make himself feel better and superior. It is a much more flawed take on the character, I would say.
Yeah. But I
Mm,
just think that trope has given rise to people acting unpleasant to appear smart.
mm, I'm going to avoid the obvious political comparisons right now.
uh, okay, yeah, we should probably get back to discussing the book we were talking about.
Yes,
So, we go to meet Sherlock Holmes, and we're told he's been whipping corpses with to determine how long bruises will form after death, and he discovers a method, an as yet undiscovered method in the story, of identifying blood stains, um, beyond doubt.
yeah, or
Which,
identifying the presence of blood. Uh, the example is a drop of blood in a large amount of water.
yeah. So, well, so that they'll know if something is a blood stain or not.
Yeah, or is it a source, or is it? I want to say ketchup, but it wouldn't have been about then.
No, no. 18 was it 1897? Oh,
Quite
hi
possibly.
Phil, how you doing?
Yeah, it came out in 1887. And hello, Phil.
Ah,
Unexpectedly, I've got something off my Tuesday bingo card on a Wednesday.
yeah. Sorry, did you say it came out in 1887?
Yeah, yes, I believe so.
So he set it
In
10 years in the future.
Yes, it seems so. It came out in the, I want to say, Benton's Christmas. Uh, oh, I've just forgotten the word. Uh,
Annual?
Annual, yes, Benton's Christmas Annual 1887 is when
And it
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 came out.
involved a scientific discovery in the field of crime. Sherlock Holmes was science fiction.
Yeah, yes, detective science fiction. Yeah,
uh,
yeah, but yes, the greatest discovery in medical criminology of of recent times, I believe he referred to it as discovery.
yeah.
Well, well, bounce, positively impassioned and bouncing around like a
Mm.
child
Oh,
is the energy he gives off.
yeah. And Phil says, I'm good, thanks. I'm a fan of the Sherlock Holmes stories. I used to get my dad to read them to me as bedtime stories. Oh, that's brilliant. I've only read this one as we're going through them week to week for this show, and I've long considered it a gap in my knowledge. I quite like, well, it's not so. I do like reading, but it's so rare I can make myself do it.
Yeah,
Uh, so, this is a way to, tick some things off that list and
yeah,
also feel like I'm being productive at the same time. Slightly terrifying bedtime stories, but yeah. Yeah, I suppose they would be.
yeah. It's 1881. It's set in apparently.
Oh. Oh, okay. So it wasn't in the future.
No, it was. I suppose that would fit with the premise. Fits with the premise of this is Watson releasing his journals of his time with Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, yeah. Um so he immediately guesses that Watson comes from, it has been to and come from Afghanistan. And Watson's like, well, Stanford must have told him. And then when the conversation of lodgings comes up, Sherlock immediately lists off the things that he does that might annoy him, which I thought was quite quite relatable, honestly.
Quite considerate of the man, given the meta reputation the character has,
Yeah.
which is a
I,
sort of domineering, cold presence who does what he wants, and Watson just uh, puts up with it.
yeah.
Sort of demonstrated in the Robert Downey Jr. Elementary. I think
Yeah.
it's
I
Downey Jr. Sherlock, even not Elementary.
I spent a good 5 minutes or so earlier derailing how much I hate that trope of genius characters,
Yeah,
of them all being thoroughly unpleasant people. I don't
yeah,
I don't like it, and I don't think it would turn out to be true in many cases.
yeah. But yeah, Holmes is seen to be an agreeable gentleman who his
His
eccentricities that are displayed are a lot of sort of some things implied to be well would be quite normal today, sort of like he's finding the origins of modern detective or deductive sciences is, and he has it's always put forward as he has a strange practice of actually using plasters. So it's got to be careful. Use poisons quite a lot as well. Oh, which would have him be, I don't think as much of a forward thinker as it would almost portrayed as, because medical history took a fair amount of time to think, hang on, we should probably wash our hands between digging around in someone's bowels, performing an autopsy, and delivering a baby.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that. Like, it was uh quite a while. Like,
Yeah,
and one they would just like, he- what was it you said? Hello, welcome to the world. Yes, that's a dead man's guts on you. Don't mind that. Like,
yeah, yeah. Ignore the blood. Yeah,
incidentally, you'll be seeing quite a bit of that.
yes. So, Holmes and Watson have met.
Yeah,
Holmes hasn't revealed particularly much about himself. Well, other than the main thing is he's implied he's a decent violin player,
yeah.
uh, which turns out to be true as it goes on.
It does. And then there's this bit where Watson, and I really like this bit, Watson is desperately trying to figure out what his deal is. And this is. He says that his ignorance is as baffling as his knowledge, and it's the whole he doesn't know that the Earth revolves around the sun thing. And
Yeah,
he says, now that I do know it, I will try my best to forget it, because you've got to. He's got to curate his brain attic, which is like much less pretentious than Mind Palace.
yeah,
To make sure that the only tools in there are the ones that are useful to him.
yes. A bit of a mixed metaphor there, where it's just sort of like storing stuff in the attic and the craftsman as his tools, sort of mashed together a bit. But it does work as he explains it.
Yeah. And so Watson is going through all the things he knows that Sherlock knows and trying to figure out a line of work that has use for all of them. And he, oh,
And, uh, and after a dozen or so points where he lists it, he just gets frustrated and throws it in the fire.
yeah.
Uh,
Only for Sherlock to then just tell him.
yes, a few days later, because of course, when you are a convalescing army doctor who has been just given the probably the biggest mystery in London, which is who is this man? What does he do? And you've got
And
nothing better.
why?
Yeah, because you've got nothing better to do because like the TV's a while away before it's rotting your mind. And there's only so much you can read with a dodgy left arm anymore.
Yeah.
Or it's just sort of like you.
Well, he does say a reason about it is one of the reasons he does it is boredom, because neither of them have any visitors unless they're clients. And
Yes, yes. Watson has no family or friends nearby.
yeah,
I,
and well, Sherlock doesn't have that many people he considers friends. Not because he doesn't like people, but because his work keeps him busy.
yes, and there's been no mention of his family so far. Admittedly, the mention of Watson's family is about one line in the opening 5 minutes to explain why he's in a hotel or looking for lodgings because he has no family either, so he's got no expectations
Yeah,
of staying with them. And yes, and
but oh, the way. And I love the fact that the way Watson gets Holmes to tell him what he does is by slagging off the theory he writes.
yes, but he doesn't know it's the theory that Sherlock's written, so he just calls it "what utter twaddle," which immediately took me back to being very young and hearing my grandma talk about things as nonsense. Twaddle would occasionally be the word that came out.
Utterly deceptive twaddle speak, says I.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then we also get the first example of how Holmes's reasoning works after that, as Holmes explains how he figured out Watson had been in Afghanistan.
yeah. And I like the way this was up because it lets us know Sherlock is clearly proud of what he does, but he doesn't like to boast. Now, I don't know whether he told Watson everything he did out of hurt because he'd disparaged his work, or, you know, because, his flatmate had just to explain where he was wrong. But
Yeah.
either way, this strikes me as someone who, well, really cares about his work. Although, and, well, I might as well mention this once. This is a story that was written in, what was it, 1881?
Set in 1881, released in 1887.
Ah, well,
Apparently written over 6 weeks in 1887.
oh my god. To write a novel in 6 weeks.
Yeah, it really puts certain authors to shame.
Yeah.
Then again, Stephen King looks at that and goes, "What took you so long?"
Yeah. Uh, I've been trying to write a book my entire life. I've never managed one.
Yeah.
6 weeks. Oh, what are we doing? Anyway,
Well, we have modern distractions.
yeah, that apropos of nothing reminds me of a quote. TV is so good now, and there are so many distractions that you know, Charles Dickens, who had nothing to do but eat mutton and attend public hangings, really shouldn't get as much credit as he does.
Yeah.
I forget what that book is from, though. Uh, anyway, what was I
Yeah.
saying? Yeah, the book is very old. There's probably going to be some outdated concepts and language in it. Almost
Yes.
certainly, because time is a thing.
Yes. The
Uh,
main the main term that comes to mind is how street urchins are referred to.
yes, yes, and we'll call them street urchins for the rest, but for the rest of this, but for context, they are referred to in the book as street Arabs.
Yes.
And yeah, that's. I mean, he doesn't say anything like bad about them, but that's just an unfortunate way of referring to.
Yeah, in modern context, it's an unfortunate way, but
Yeah,
at the time, it was how it would have been written. So,
yeah. uh,
yeah,
but anyway, yeah. Sherlock explains to Watson what he does, explains to Watson how he does it, and Watson writes in his journal, and I quote, "Wonderful," I ejaculated.
yes, he had his first ejaculation of the book.
Oh God, are we gonna have a Watson ejaculates counter?
I think probably not, because we would have had to set that up before.
Yeah, maybe next week. Depends on whether or not he says it in the second story. But I counted at least two in this one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh.
But
And then, well, the story starts.
yes, then the actual sort of the murder mystery, as it were.
Yeah, Lestrade comes in, tells Holmes, uh, there's a bit of a problem. Am I remembering this right?
Uh, Someone comes. I want to say it might have actually been Gregson.
Yeah, it
But
might have been. Sorry, I was misremembering. Uh,
no, a telegram. That's what happens. They get a telegram because Lestrade and Gregson are already on scene.
yeah.
It's a
Gregson turns up later, then Lestrade turns up, and then drama happens, and then part two starts.
Yeah.
So at this point, Holmes gets a telegram asking for his assistance on in a house on Brixton Road, I believe it is, an abandoned house where something horrible has been found. A man has been found dead with no wound on him, and Sherlock gives the letter to Watson, and he says that's the most horrible thing I've ever read. And Watson basically goes, "Well, go get your hat. We're leaving in a couple of minutes." And Watson does. He just goes and gets his hat, and is just sort of like has a bit of the energy of, "You've seen many horrible things in the army, enough to last a lifetime. Would you like to see some more?" "Oh God, yes."
Yeah.
Because it's a mystery. It's something different.
Yeah.
Yes. So they take a cabin, and I believe Sherlock explains a bit more about exactly how it works, and how that Gregson and Lestrade get the credit, and how they're the best of the bad bunch.
Yeah, but they are kind of they're at each other's throats a bit. They kind of both want them. They have the air of two people who want the same promotion.
Yes.
uh,
Yes, I believe it's sort of implied that Lestrade is the better of the two of them, but Gregson has the confidence uh, that sort of outweighs his abilities.
yeah. Confidence, whereas Lestrade knows better when to ask for help.
Yes. Even though, ironically, it was Gregson who sent the telegram.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
they take a.
they find the body of, I believe it was Enoch Drebber.
Yes. Enoch Drebber of Cleveland, Ohio, as they say so many times when they make reference to him.
Yeah.
Which supposes to enforce people to remember that it is important to remember that this man is an American.
Yeah.
Yeah, but before they find the body and go in, Holmes, of course, potters about outside and investigates stuff, and is already piecing together a lot of clues, but it won't be revealed until near the end of this chapter, which I think is only sort of like chapter 2 or chapter 3
Yeah.
overall. Although there are only about 8 chapters in the whole thing overall, so of course the murder's going to be relatively early.
Yeah, this is not a very long story.
Yeah.
It's not as short a story as I was expecting, to be honest, but it's like it's shorter than the average novel.
Yeah. Yeah. But and they then get into the room, and they finally see the central mystery, which is Enoch Drebber of Cleveland, Ohio, on the floor, dead. A man who is described as having a beastly appearance and that manner, and his features contorted to almost ape-like anger. They certainly make the victim, make Enoch sound almost subhuman in the description, in his anger and his fear, and
Yeah.
possibly just his general look and manner.
They don't really want us to feel sorry for this man in their description. Well, I say, yeah, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle clearly was not going for sympathy here.
Yeah, yeah, and there are possibly other outside influences that it's probably better to explain later on that will have affected how he would have described Drebber and Stagnerson.
Uh, what was his
Staggerson.
name? Joseph Stant
Stangerson, I think it is.
Stangerson. Yeah, it's an odd name.
Yeah. Well, Enoch Drebber isn't much better.
Yeah,
If
I
if
could at
anything,
least read that
yeah,
aloud.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So the scene is the room in the abandoned sort of like unrented room or rooms. It's just like the scene, the body with no external injury lying there, a
Yeah.
new top hat placed on the floor to his side, dust everywhere, paper peeling from the walls. There are signs of blood, but there's no wound on the body. He, his features contorted in anger, fear, into this horrible animal shape almost. And a candle all melted on the mantelpiece. And then hidden on the wall that is found later by Lestrade, who points out in a boastful manner that it is that he found it and that Gregson missed it. It is the word Rach on the wall written in blood.
Rach,
But,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but
yeah,
Rach, I think.
yeah, it is. Yeah, it's on the wall, written in blood, and it is. And of course, it is misinterpreted, interpreted by Lestrade, who believes that means that that there is going to be a Rachel involved in the case. And
Which
in this,
Sherlock quickly discourages him from chasing up because he has determined that that would be a waste of time.
yes, in the what it turns out to be the scene that is the first appearance of a magnifying glass as a detective's tool. Sherlock examines the scene and pulls out a tape measure and a magnifying glass from his pocket.
Which would become rather iconic.
Yes, along with the deerstalker.
Oh yeah, the deer stalker.
Which, while they mention that Sherlock puts on a hat in this, it does not say what hat. So the deerstalker must appear later, or it's a side effect of the adaptation. Then again, looking at one of the original artworks for it, it could be a deerstalker on his head, but it's not exactly clear. Especially whereas a picture in the same release has him wearing a top hat or a similar style.
Yeah.
So yes, so he's got the scene, and we see, and he goes about his examinations and his potterings, seemingly forgetting that everyone else is there for about 20 minutes as he does his work. And then he lists off many things that sort of like the height of the assailant, the style of shoes he was wearing, that he has unkept nails, and other things like that. And of
Yeah.
course, he was the one bleeding, and everyone's just sort of standing there in amazement. And he mentions that Rache is German for revenge, and so don't follow Rachel. But it is also probably a misdirect as well, in and of itself, it being put there.
Yeah.
And he also figures out that it must have been poison. And then when it comes to moving Drebber's body, they find a clue, a
Yes.
gold
The ring.
woman's wedding ring specifically. And with this, we get a bit of a description from Sherlock as to how we figured this all out, and Watson expresses amazement, not ejaculating, but expressing,
Yeah.
and we get a hint that Sherlock has a bit of vanity attached to it. It was just sort of like that. That was amazing. And he's sort of like he's proud that someone's noticed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Though, an interesting thing I want to point out is when he's talking to Watson about the case, there is a moment where he says, oh, what was it? Well, he deduces that this whole thing has upset Watson, and Watson says, I really should be more hardened than this. I didn't lose my nerve watching my comrades hacked to pieces. And Sherlock, in what has become, due to cultural osmosis, an uncharacteristic, although is actually quite characteristic, display of understanding of people, he says, I can understand. And I understand there is mystery about this which stimulates the imagination. Where there is no imagination, there is no horror. So he basically puts Watson's unnerve into perspective for him, which I thought was quite nice.
Yes, and as you say, it shows a lot of more understanding of people that Sherlock has because
No, Sherlock Holmes, just from this story alone, seems like a very compassionate man.
yeah, in the cultural zeitgeist and the meta sort of impression of Sherlock, Sherlock is a very low EQ character. Sort of like he has, to borrow from the sort of like terms that I will only apply to fictional people rather than actual people, or sort of high IQ, low EQ is sort of the meta idea of it. So he's smart, but he's bad with people, as you say.
Yeah.
Hey, but no, he sees the part of it is, of course, for how his ideas work, his investigation is. He needs to understand how people react, so he has a very good sort of look into the mindset. Granted, he may not necessarily be able to predict entirely accurately. There is statistically a chance he makes a mistake.
But then he is focused on his work, and he's in the business of helping solve crimes rather than prevent them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But, at this point in the story, Watson takes rest because the bad day and the horror of the case and just the leftovers of his own injuries, he's have tired him out, and he retires to lie on the sofa for a couple of hours, while Sherlock goes out and to a concert, because that's what you do in Victorian London, or indeed in London, Edwardian London, I think it might have been. No, one of them. London. That's what you do in pre-television London. You go
London in the late 19th century.
Yeah, you go to concerts, and he that is interesting because he talks about how he deducts and sees things, and then within the same breath, he starts talking about musicians and sort of a passion for art, and indeed makes reference to the title, A Study in Scarlet,
Ah.
to the scarlet thread of murder going through the boring skein of life, or pardon me, along those lines.
I have that quote here, actually. There's the scarlet thread of murder running through the colourless skein of life. At least I think that's how you pronounce that word. And our duty is to unravel it and isolate it and expose every inch of it. And now for lunch. And then for Norman Neruda. Her attack and her bowing are splendid.
Yeah. Yes. And it's a tiny bit of a surprise. Norman Neruda is a woman. Yes. Sorry, I couldn't resist making that meta joke there, but yeah. But for how Sherlock views it, it gives an impression of he views sort of like detection not only as a science, but there is an element of art to it, and it sort of also casts a bit on how he views Gregson and Lestrade as they are fine officers of Scotland Yard, but they have no skill for the art of it, and that's why they struggle on the more difficult of cases where you need a bit of imagination in for it, because they have no imagination, but
Yeah.
they are by and by good officers.
Yeah, like they're well trained, but not so much imaginatively inclined.
Yeah. Yes, and yeah, so when Holmes returns many an hour later, so that it wasn't just the concert he'd been to, he's got the paper and he's sort of like, yes, there is a good account of today's incident in the paper. But also, luckily, they missed out this detail. Also, I sent off a couple of telegrams to America, but they missed out this detail. So I took an advert out to report a lost ring being
Yeah.
found along outside the street between the street and the pub.
Him knowing, of course, that either the murderer or an accomplice would come to claim it.
Yes, but he uses Watson's name on the advert, which is he said, "I do hope you don't mind that I use your name," and Watson replies, "Not at all," which then expanded out in sort of the meta Sherlock of Sherlock will pretend to be Watson or like use his name or his reputation to get what he wants without concern for Watson's reputation, his name, or what Watson wants. Which is again building into.
I mean, I can see how you would get that from this, but I do think it's a bit of an exaggeration of what happened.
Yeah, and so far it has happened once.
Yeah.
Whereas in a lot of adaptations, it happens constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh.
Yeah. So, but yes, and they do have a visitor coming shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
After which they make some preparations in case they are receiving a murderer. Watson cleans and loads his revolver. Sherlock is, I think he's basically there with almost a plank of wood ready to go, just in case. And they await and get a very surprising visitor, an old lady. They're expecting sort of like a man and a 6 foot something, or a male accomplice, just to come and get it. But there's this lady claiming that is the ring of her daughter, who lost it while her husband is away at sea, and he'll be awful mad when if he comes back and she hasn't got it anymore, especially when he's been on the drink.
Now, obviously, that like they know this person is lying because they recovered, like, well, Sherlock has already deduced that the killer has quite a, well, correct me if I'm wrong because I might be misremembering. Hasn't Sherlock already figured out that the murderer is quite a well-built man?
Yes. Earlier that day is explained it in the carriage to Watson, I believe.
So either the killer or Enoch Drebber would have had the ring, and well, this description doesn't fit either of them as far as Sherlock knows. So obviously, lies.
Yes. I also think it would have been a little disturbing if Enoch Drebber had turned up to claim the ring.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was dead. I got better.
I got better.
Yeah. You turned me into a corpse. A corpse?
I got better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we never do find out who this accomplice is.
Yes. I believe the line is in. I'm happy to tell my own secrets, but I'm not going to. But I'm not a grass, basically.
Yeah, and honestly, mate, respect.
Yeah.
uh,
Yes. But Sherlock follows this accomplice, and actually jumps onto the back of the carriage, from my understanding of it, when pursuing them.
yeah, and this accomplice, whoever they may be, manages to escape the carriage in motion without Sherlock noticing.
And without the driver noticing either.
Yeah.
And managed to convince both Sherlock and Watson that they were this doddery old lady, when it's Sherlock believes after they got away that they are in fact probably a young to middle-aged man, and who was in disguise.
That
Which,
is some feat of stealth there.
yes, it's a demonstration of social stealth that would make Agent 47 proud.
Yeah, speaking of social stealth, that's a key feature of the street urchins. I wanted to bring this up back then, but I forgot to. There is in things set in London, there is often a trope of there are certain people who just get overlooked, who people will happily talk around as though they are not there, which is why the street urchins are so useful, because they are really good at gathering information, because nobody pays any attention to their presence.
Yeah, Sherlock also refers to them as more hardworking than any half dozen of Scotland Yard.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
he does, like, I won't say disdain, but he does have a bit of friendly banter with Scotland Yard as a concept.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the attitude towards deduction. It's sort of like...
Yeah. Even a Scotland Yard officer could figure it out, I remember him saying at one point.
Yeah. We did forget that he actually went and spoke to a member of Scotland Yard.
Oh yes, who was it? The first officer on the scene, John Rance, wasn't it?
Yes. Oh god, I'm just applying the yes. I know what I'm talking about. I haven't forgotten either. Just agree with them and act as if you were half a second behind them. No, I was struggling to remember.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't really remember what he said, to be honest. I've read this twice in preparation for today. I still don't remember what he said.
Rance gives a description of the scene and how we found it, and walking down the street after that, he finds the man. There's a moment where his courage fails and he doesn't, or it looks like his courage fails, but he's looking to see if there's someone else to call in with him in case it's sort of like more trouble than he can handle. Or he goes in and he comes out and he's encountered a large drunken man. And he seems to be, and it takes a great effort to get him to go on his way. And he signals down for the assistance, after he signaled down for assistance by the good old blowing of the whistle.
Yeah.
Or Sherlock pays him a half sovereign, I believe, for his information, and then explains outright that he will never get anywhere within Scotland Yard, and just sort of like, here is a half sovereign for you, and put away any hopes you have of a promotion. You're clearly not material for a sergeant.
This isn't really for you.
Yeah, because you basically just let the killer get away. He wasn't your... Yeah, no. If you had arrested the man, you would have been sergeant by the end of the day. But clearly you are not sergeant material.
It was just sort of like the murderer was literally gift wrapped for you, and you somehow fumbled it.
He was in your hands. Uh,
Instincts, do you have them?
ah,
Yes. It's like how you say certain things with some class. That is what Sherlock was doing, which was basically, you're a moron.
yeah.
And put away any of your hopes for promotion. Yes.
Uh,
But yes, that seems to be a part of where Sherlock's disdain for Scotland Yard comes from, because people are average. As a general rule in life,
I
people
think
are
it's
average.
more that in many cases they're content to be so, that he has a problem with.
Yeah.
Uh,
But yes, so after that, and after Sherlock's got that, they off to bed, and in the next morning, while they're looking in the papers, of which we get condensed versions of several of them, which have all gone down sensationalist avenues and some conspiracy theories of the time. Of which one of them is still semi-prevalent today, of the secret socialist network that's controlling everything.
ah,
Because the information on Raqqa got shared by the papers, and it linked back to a sensationalist murder in another country where that was daubed over the body.
but that is well, it was immediately guessed by Holmes to be a deliberate misdirect on the part of the killer.
Yes. But Sherlock is saying with John that he's got a full enough idea of the case with a telegram that has arrived, or the telegram that was responded to, that he jotted off to California before the day before. And at this point, who should arrive but Tobias Gregson?
Yeah, and we have a lot of asides in this story, don't we? Because Gregson comes up to say he's basically solved the case and apprehended the murderer. Uh, and it goes into his account of events. He goes to a family who initially deny any knowledge of events, but one of them, uh, basically, the daughter, just can't really stand the dishonesty and, well, thinks it would do more harm than good to lie. And
Yeah.
so the mother gives information that I think Enoch Drebber was, uh, I don't know what a good word is here.
A drunk and a scoundrel.
Yeah, yeah. And he was after the daughter, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, I believe her name was Alice.
Yeah. So he's after Alice. Her brother, who is the suspect, obviously took exception to that and left with a big stick,
Yes.
which, um,
Yeah. That
do you suppose he
well,
spoke softly?
yeah. Yes, he spoke softly and carried on. I don't think he spoke softly. I
No,
think he
no,
spoke.
I don't think the occasion called for soft speaking.
Yeah. He'd been staying there as they'd been running essentially a B&B, I think would be the equivalent nowadays.
Yeah,
They were renting rooms, I think, to Enoch Trevor and Joseph Banks,
yeah.
who
you should have mentioned at this point. Drebber was rich and Stangerson was his secretary. That was the dynamic between them.
We
So,
later find out that they were once equals and both rich.
yeah, but it also sort of infirms that Drebber got what he wanted when it came to his dealings with Stangerson.
Yeah.
And so Stangerson wasn't really able. But after Drebber made a move on the daughter, as it tried to kiss her,
Yeah.
big no at the time, and in such a way because they were not courting or promised to each other. The mother essentially turfed them both out, and they were due to catch a train to Liverpool and somehow missed it. So Drebber and Stangerson were arguing on the platform. Stangerson said, "Fine, if you don't meet me here in an hour when the next one's here, we'll meet at a hotel. We'll meet there." And Drebber goes, gets rat-assed, and then goes back within an hour to well, no, he goes back and tries to get Alice to come with him and be his bride, his unwilling bride. And that's when the brother goes out with a large stick because I believe he's in the Navy.
Yeah.
So is not a man to be trifled.
Yeah. So Gregson assumes, as one might, that the brother must have killed him, protecting his sister, and arrests him, and then in comes Lestrade to tell him basically there's been another murder.
Yeah. One of the pieces of
You
circumstantial
don't know
evidence.
how hard it was not to try a Scottish accent when I said that.
Yeah, there's been a murder. But one of the pieces of evidence Gregson has against the brother is the fact that the brother went, "I suppose you're here to take me in connection to that Drebber murder." And it was just all like, well, we hadn't mentioned it yet, so why would he bring it up? That must be a sign of guilt.
Yeah.
Like, no, man who reads the paper in a time where all men read the paper.
Well, because there's very little else to do.
Yeah, possibly several. Very little else to do apart from go overseas for king/queen and country. And yeah.
Yeah. But obviously, there having been another murder means that this brother can't be their man.
Yeah, because Stangerson had died while the brother was in custody.
Yeah, and well, Sherlock has, to his own satisfaction, already figured out who the murderer is.
And yeah, he is very much humouring Gregson, and to the extent of he's been supplying him with water, whiskey, and a cigar while he is, and being very patronising. I think one line was, how exciting he yawned.
Yeah. It's like, good job, Gregson. Good for you.
Yeah. And then Lestrade describes the scene and that he'd gone around so many hotels, like he spent the afternoon and evening the day before doing it, and started bright and early doing it again this morning, until he found one where they had a Stangerson staying, and to give him the room and tell them to head up because they assumed that he was the man that Stangerson said he was waiting for, and how he went up and he saw something that did give him a shock in the way that nothing else he'd ever seen at Scotland Yard ever had. A stream of blood coming out from under the door and pooling on the skirting board opposite, which has all the energy of yes, that was sensationalist in this period. Because again, limited things like TV not having happened and ruined everyone's tolerance for things.
Yeah. But so this murder is a mite more gruesome than the previous one.
Yes.
But again, I believe the word Rache is written on the wall.
Yes, it is daubed in blood above Stangerson's body. He was stabbed with a knife through the heart.
Yeah.
Yes, and the door was locked from the inside, but the window was open. And Lestrade had found a witness that saw a man climbing out of the window down the ladder that propped against it. Because you could keep private property ladders just in the streets of London and they wouldn't be nicked at the time.
That feels weird.
Yeah, that feels weird, but yes, but there was a witness who saw it, but the man moved with such confidence in his actions that they just assumed he was a carpenter doing some work, repair work on the hotel, though it seemed a bit early to be starting work as it was about 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
The witness said it, and yes, but some things were found at the scene, mostly expecting Drebber's wallet, because Stangerson kept hold of the money because Drebber could not be trusted. To actually manage it. A book, the travel case, and a small box with 2 pills.
Yeah.
In which Sherlock gets most excited.
And it's the pills are a particularly interesting thing because well, obviously the first death was by poison.
Yes.
And he tests it on a dog.
Yes, a dog that Mrs. Hudson had asked, though she hasn't been identified as such, I don't think.
No, not yet. Just
No,
the
but
housekeeper.
The housekeeper has to ask Dr. Watson to put out of its misery because it is old, it is in pain, and there's nothing that can be done for it.
Yeah. So, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle goes to great pains to stress that no, that this isn't as cruel as it sounds on its face.
Yeah, the dog is long white in its muzzle that shows it has passed beyond its the number of years of a dog's expectancy. is a sort of phrase to describe it.
Yeah.
So the third person to die in this story is a dog.
Yeah.
And it is in the name of science.
Although it should be mentioned that the first pill they give the dog does nothing, and Holmes gets really impatient. It's like, I couldn't possibly have been wrong because it all points to this, and then he gives us a second pill, which practically instantly kills it.
Yeah. Yes, the pill mixed with water and milk.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't have anything straight, you had to add water. It seems in these stories, because we have been offered a grand total of 3 drinks: coffee, whiskey and water, water and milk.
Yeah.
Yes. And yes, the dog is taken out near immediately, and Sherlock goes on. By this point, we have actually met the street urchins, the Baker Street Irregular, as they become known in the greater meta lore. Or indeed, they might be called that in one of the later stories. Got that.
Yeah.
But we've met them, and there was much consternation from Mrs. Hudson about these 6 scruffy children coming in, and we're told that a specific one is to come up as the spokesperson of the group, and Sherlock has sent them out on a job. This was before Lestrade came around, but not by much. Not
Yeah.
Lestrade, but not by much.
Yeah.
He pays each of them a shilling, and they go out, continue to look for this item he says. And after sort of like the poison stuff is this Gregson and Lestrade basically gang up and get Watson on board as well to get Sherlock to explain everything he knows about the
And
information.
he stresses that divulging anything could be dangerous, and he doesn't want to say anything until the suspect is in custody, and assumes responsibility for any unfortunate anything that goes wrong, basically.
Yeah. Very much given he's sort of like I don't want any actions of the yard to undermine any of my own. And of course, it is then that the spokesperson of the irregulars come up. I cannot remember his name off.
Oh,
W.
begins with a W. I can't really remember either.
Yeah.
No, I don't have it.
Yeah. Oh. Stangerson had another clue of notes that Stangerson had was a note that was JH is in Europe, which is that and the poison were like the 2 big things.
Yeah.
That got whirling. Wiggins. That's the kid.
Wiggins. How did I forget Wiggins? That's a brilliant name.
Because he's mentioned exactly twice.
Yeah, but his name is Wiggins. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Chief Wiggins.
Chief Wiggins.
Street Irregulars.
Oh.
But yes, Wiggins comes in and says he's found the carriage that he wanted. Because earlier he'd identified a carriage, a 4-wheeler, with a horse that has 3 old shoes and 1 new shoe on its right foreleg, if I remember correctly. And he's been looking for it. And he set the irregulars to it. And they found it, and he goes, "Excellent, could you send the driver up? I need some help with my cases." It's just sort of like Watson's going, "He never mentioned anything about a trip. What's going on?" And then he fills a travel box quickly, and then turns to the police and is like, "You really should use a new spring mod." And it's just sort of like, we prefer the other ones at hand. It's just like we realise that they're talking about handcuffs, as Sherlock demonstrates, has his out.
Yeah.
Out and
cuffs the suspect, Jefferson Hope.
Yes, he gets Jefferson to help lift the case up, and then he cuffs him and says, "Gentlemen, here is the murderer of Enoch Dweber and Joseph
Strangerson, the other one.
Stangerson.
Enoch Dweber and the other one.
Yeah. Enoch Dweber and the one that somehow has a worse.
he tries to escape. He almost goes headlong out of the window in handcuffs.
Yes. Admittedly, that bit comes later in the story. That is the end of part one. Where it ends, part one ends with Sherlock slapping cuffs on the murderer, or who is believed to be the murderer. And
Yeah.
something that made me check us, and this is why I know where Study in Scarlet was initially published. The thing I checked was I thought that this might have been released chapter by chapter, like Great Expectations and The Christmas Carol both were. Or certainly Great Expectations might have been Carol. But no, it wasn't, because this would have been sort of like quite a shock if it had been like you get the next chapter of the Sherlock Holmes book and it's set in a desolate desert in America. You're just going, what?
Well, why is this happening? What has this got to do with Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson?
As a massive tonal shift occurs, as
Yeah,
well as a shift temporarily, because the story of a man and
lost
climbing
in the
over,
desert,
lost in the desert, climbing over a mountain,
and we
in,
are introduced to John Ferrier.
and Lucy, who
Yeah,
at the time was just Lucy.
yeah,
The
and like he's carrying this little girl trying to find her water, and he has to explain to her in delicate terms that her mom's dead, and so are their other companions.
that all 19 other people they were traveling, and that they themselves will very soon be dead.
Which Lucy takes about as well as a person could.
Yeah, well, she's a 5-year-old who has faith in God in a time where that meant probably a hell of a lot more than it does now to the average 5-year-old.
Yeah. And she says, well,
Oh,
why didn't you say? If we'll be dead soon, I'll soon be with Mother again. I bet she'll greet us with a big pitcher of water.
big pitcher of water and with toasted cakes of some sort. Can't remember.
Yeah.
I want to say maize cake. But it was something that seemed a little strange to a modern sensibility. And they're on sort of like a cliff up above, and they fall asleep, the two of them, because John is lost a lot of weight due to lack of food.
Yeah, he's described as being very, like, I'm not quite sure this. I had a word in my head, but I'm not sure what it means. Emaciated?
Emaciated, yes.
Yeah.
At least it's in a better condition because basically everyone gave up part of their thing to make sure Lucy had enough.
Yeah, well, as you would. She, like,
Yeah, yeah. But after this, then half an hour after they fall asleep, a great convoy starts to pass through the desert. So large is it that by the time the front of it has reached where they are and actually stopped, the end of it is still beyond the horizon.
that is quite a convoy.
Yes.
Uh, basically, they're Mormons.
Yes, they're Mormons leaving from persecution to find the promised land. And one of their sort of scouts at the front spots a flutter of pink fabric above, and they climb up and they find John and Lucy. Half dozen of them have climbed up because they think it's possibly an ambush, but they're not sure who would be ambushing them because the closest tribe to them they passed days ago.
Yeah.
But they're still worried that it is the Native Americans.
So John claims Lucy as his daughter. She takes the name Lucy Ferrier, and they go to live, with the Mormons, and he does very well out of that for a time.
Yes, the condition of being taken with them is that they will live a Mormon life, to live the Mormon tenet. and they embrace the group and do
With one notable exception, which we will come to.
yeah. But by the time that they get to Promised Land, Zion, or Salt Lake City, as it was known shortly after founding and is still known today.
Yeah.
John is thought of in so well that he is given a plot of land as big as any that others receive, apart from Brigham Young and the four elders, the Council of Four, the Holy. They interchangeably use those titles throughout.
Brigham Young.
Yeah, Brigham Young. I believe he is the direct successor as leader of the after Joseph Smith.
No, Brigham Young.
Brigham. Yeah.
Brigham. Oh, I knew that name sounded familiar, but like I was like, did he actually name a character Brigham Young?
Oh, Brigham. Yeah, Brigham Young is a actual historical figure.
Oh.
Who I believe is the he was seen as a prophet by the Mormons. I believe he was the direct follower of, in terms of leadership, of Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism.
Yeah.
There might have been a few in between. My knowledge on early Mormon leadership is quite patchy.
Yeah. But the point is, he is in the direct line of succession.
He is in charge of this entire group. Basically, the king of Salt Lake City, in many ways. He's but yeah. John Ferrier gets this land and he works it well. And he goes to temple. He pays his dues and stuff. But and he raises Lucy, and he's a part of the community. Within 3 years, farmers flourishing. Within 5 years, he's well off. Within 9, he is considered rich. And probably considered amongst the richest in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, and 9 years on, Lucy is 14. So obviously, the Mormons start trying to marry her off.
That's 9 years on is where John is rich. When we see Lucy, he
I know, I was joking.
Yeah,
so that is an important plot point to come shortly.
Yeah, it's 13 years after they after they rescue John and Lucy that the trouble starts. But Jefferson Hope meets Lucy when she's around 16.
Jefferson Hope is the murderer.
Yeah,
I don't know if we. I can't quite remember if we established that.
Yes, Jefferson Hope is the
So this is essentially a villain origin story.
Murderer. He meets Lucy when she's around. Yes, he meets Lucy around 16. When she's around 16, he's older, but it's not implied to be much older. It's sort of like he's.
I mean, he would have to be reasonably young to still be able to do the things he does in the present day of this story.
Yeah. He's likely in his early 20s.
Yeah, which would 1897. Okay, so 1840. That would put him in his 70s at the time. At the time of his apprehension.
And that was 20 years of hunting. Okay. No, I have no idea how be able to look it up properly later. But he and Lucy basically fall in love
Yeah.
over time. And
No,
uh,
I do think no, I do think you were right because the no the the part in the desert was in 1847. So 12 years later, yeah, he'd be probably in his 60s, mid to late 60s by the time he's captured.
yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
it's not really important.
yeah. One fact there is Elder Staggerson is the one who taught them the ways of Mormonism, and he's one of the Holy Four. So that is a connection. But this isn't Joseph Stangerson. This is Joseph's father, and Enoch Drebber's father is also one of the Holy Four. Or it is important, but there's one aspect that John has not embraced of Mormonism. He has
Yeah,
refused to marry,
yeah.
like
He
at
he
all.
he doesn't acknowledge, and he's specific in this. He doesn't think a Mormon marriage is a proper marriage because, presumably, because
Polygamy.
yeah, it's less marrying someone and more recruiting them.
Yes, and there is is an implication of sort of, well, I say implication, it's sort of outright stated harem
Yeah,
marriage. And he has vowed to himself that he's never going to let Lucy marry a Mormon.
and
And
so he's all set to let her marry Jefferson Hope.
yes, who is a hunter who also is helping set up a silver mine because frontiersmen tell you, yeah, you got to do it all when you live on the. Yeah,
Sorry,
but
I lost you there for a second. What did you say?
yeah, I was talking about how he was a trained hunter, but he was also helping set up a silver mine
Yeah,
because frontiersmen, they've
you
got to do it all.
they have. Well, I mean, you would need a wide set of skills, well, as possible in those days.
Yeah, but uh, Brigham Young visits um, John and basically puts a ultimatum on the table. Um, Marry Lucy off to a Mormon or face our wrath. And this is right after we had a description of the Dantes, I think they're referred to as at one point. Uh, Essentially, bands of roving men who essentially a secret police force. They're depicted as roving men who will kidnap women because there's only so many women within the society, and like if every man is marrying multiple, then you're going to run out quickly. Especially
Yeah,
if every woman can only marry one man, and then they also serve as a secret police and sort of tattle on each other. And like there have been people richer than John who have vanished due to this group, and he's essentially threatened to have them put on him.
yeah. Although, it doesn't really cow him so much because, and this is one of my favourite lines in the story, when he gets pissed off with the two suitors, he says, "You can come to my house when my daughter calls for you and not before. There are two ways out of this room: the door and the window. Which do you care to use?"
Yes, it is a way because he comes back the day after he's given this 30-day ultimatum, and Drebber and Stangerson, Enoch and Joseph, respectively, so the ones who get murdered, are sitting in his living room like they own the place and are debating between them in almost like it's a game as to which one of them is going to get Lucy, who is described as the flower of Utah, sort of like she is a beauty.
Yeah.
And they are pieces of work.
Yeah, let's just leave it at that.
Yeah.
I'm
And
suddenly a lot less sorry about what happened to them after reading that part at this point in my initial reading.
yeah, I think between them at this point they're on a dozen wives. Or something, or like they're definitely in the double digit.
Yeah. Well, they're
It's
possessions to them, aren't they?
yeah. But yeah, as the month goes on, they've sent off a message through a friendly trader who's going in the area. Hope is where his mine
Yeah.
and they've sent off the message, but they're getting sort of daily, almost tauntings and sort of like to build the fear. Like on the first, when he wakes up after the first night, there is a note pinned to his blanket right above his heart saying 29, and then the next day there is 28 burnt into the kitchen ceiling, stuff like that. So the psychological pressure is being applied.
Yeah. And well, obviously he's not gonna just take this. So when Jefferson Hope comes back,
On,
that's it.
on on the penultimate day he arrives, but he has also scouted out the area and knows where there are lookouts and where they have covered and where they don't have covered
Yeah.
on the house. Important.
Yep. The three of them grab what they can carry, and that will be useful to them, and Scarper.
Yes. What food that they can, a large urn of water, a
Several
handful of
$1,000s in gold, apparently.
$2,000 in gold and 5 in paper, so cash.
So is that 5,000 or $5?
I'm assuming in the context 5,000, but
Yeah, yeah, I know. You
the
would
way it's
assume
written
that.
does make it sound like I have $5 in usable currency and a load of gold in a backpack.
Unconventional, but it'll do.
Yeah, and Jefferson also says that he has a similar as well, which that silver mine must have really done well for him. A month or so he's been gone.
Yeah. Sorry, something fell off my desk there.
Haunted by a cat, you are. Yeah, and then yeah, and they flee out the window through the fields and walk to a gorge or ravine, one of the two, where there are horses and two horses and a donkey, and they start taking sort of like narrow routes to get out of traveling to buy as much time and distance as possible, and they helpfully manage to pick up a call and response password while escaping.
Yeah.
So when they are challenged later by someone, because no one travels to and from Salt Lake City without the permission of
the
Brigham
Holy
Young
Four.
and the Holy Four. So they are challenged and they are asked, "Who gave you permission to travel this route?" The Holy Four. 7 to 9, 5 to 7.
That was
Carry.
it. I kept my brain kept wanting to say 9 to 5, and it's like, no, that's not it.
Yeah, my brain also did And they got let on, and they travelled. They slept for a brief bit.
Working 9 to 5. What a way to make a living. All right, you can go.
They travel and they get a couple of days away, but they have run out of food. So Jefferson Hope, being a trained hunter, goes out looking for some, and he is gone 5 hours.
But then he gets lost on the way back with his kill.
Yeah, or part of his kill, because the animal he does kill for the fig is far, far too big.
Yeah, he takes a leg, doesn't he?
Haunch and part of the rib cage, so yes.
Ah.
Or haunch and part of the flank.
Yeah.
So, wouldn't necessarily have the ribs, but will have the meat above, sort of standing correctly.
Yeah.
But by the time he's back, no one responds to his call of "Hello!"
Yeah.
So he calls again louder, still no response. So he drops the meat in a panic and runs. And he finds the camp, and there's no one there, no horses. And then at the edge of the light, once he gets one of the sticks in the fire and gets it up back to a full light, he notices at the edge of the circle upturned red earth that had not been there before.
And John Ferrier has been killed and buried in a shallow grave.
Yes, which is frankly more than I expected from this sort of like ruthless band. And that they actually buried it. I would have thought they'd have left him out to be eaten by the carrion. But...
Yeah. So, knowing where she's gone, Jefferson Hope follows Lucy back to Salt Lake City. He gets out of one of his previous associates at great personal risk. That I think she was married to Enoch Drebber.
Yeah, she was married to Drebber, who then also got her got the Ferrier estate, so the farm as well. Well, but while Dweber got Lucy, Stangerson killed John.
Yeah.
Yeah, so safe to say he isn't happy.
Yeah. He crashes her funeral because she essentially dies of, well, we're given to understand that she essentially dies of a broken heart.
How very Star Wars.
Well,
or how very studying Scarlet or Padme.
Well, we don't know that that's what killed her. Maybe she did herself in somehow.
Yeah, but she was married to Drebber the day before Jefferson got there.
Yeah.
She is described as someone who is not long for this world during the ceremony and just after it. So she has the look of someone. They mentioned sort of like not in taking her own life, but just not got the will to live, which, given the harsh conditions, even of sort of like a built-up settlement time period, and not looking after yourself and that can desperately shorten your life.
Yeah, I suppose it would. So he crashes her funeral, takes the ring off her finger, and says she will not be buried with this. And essentially he swears vengeance on, well, Drebber and Stangerson. Those two guys, those dudes. And that's when we come back to Baker Street, where Jefferson Hope is actually now that he's been caught, surprisingly cordial.
Yeah, after his attempt to jump out of the window, where he lacerates his hands and his face, and
Yeah.
it takes all four of the men there to keep him from getting out of the window.
Yeah. And this is a
And
good 40 years later.
yeah, because yes, Holmes is described as being surprisingly strong for his size slot, because he's described as quite tall, quite thin, with a hawkish nose. Watson is below his usual strength, shattered arm bones, and illness has robbed him of his health. But we have to imagine that Gregson and Lestrade are probably of average strength there.
Well, I
So
mean, they're policemen. They will have had experience trying to collar people.
yeah. So overall, he is probably fighting close to the strength of four average men. If one's below average and one's above average, confirmed at the time, and then two are probably above average, but we'll just say average
Yeah.
for battle. And he's just there, and it's like it takes tying his legs as on top of the handcuffs and the fighting to actually get him to calm down.
And then
And
once they get him to the courthouse, it is revealed that well, he had an aortic aneurysm in his chest. So he could,
yes,
like, despite his age and his deadly medical condition,
he,
he's
he,
he's
he was beating them.
he still put up a sizable resistance against four men.
Yes, but he confesses to everything, refuses to reveal his accomplice. He
Yeah.
confesses, and it's why he did it. So hence the story, and a couple of his attempts, which includes shooting through the window of Enoch, shooting through Enoch's window and almost getting this, and almost managing to drop a boulder on Stangerson. But they adapted, they got guards and got out of there, and he then needed to recover his health, which took 7 years due to other side effects, because he was getting well, extreme exposure because he was living in the wilds without proper resources.
Yeah, and underfeeding.
Yeah, but by the time he returned to Salt Lake City, trying to hunt them down, Stangerson and Weber had left not a month before, because
He has a real habit of just missing them.
yeah, because there had been a schism within the church between the old, who were like, no, our power, ours, and the young, who was just like, just let us do some stuff. And the old, like, no, off. So, yeah, the young were kicked out basically. But Stangerson had not managed to get his wealth that he had been expecting, because he expected that he would be richer than Dweber once his father died, because apparently his father was not long for this world, and he inherited his father's leather tannery. His father was still alive, and he didn't inherit them, so he was basically destitute when he was kicked out. But Dweber,
Trevor.
yeah, Deborah, he had managed to continue to keep the Ferrier farm working and being of a valuable, so he was well off, and managed to also convert some assets into cash beforehand, which makes it sound like he sold them as well. And so, yeah, so Stangerson became his secretary. Any hope of sort of A, survival, hunting, B, money. And managed to catch sight of them through sheer luck in another town in America near the coast. I can't remember which one, but he was also recognized, and he was arrested under having been a troublesome rival of love.
That's
Is
yeah, that is an interesting way to channel the fact that you literally kidnapped a woman from the man with whom she was eloping.
yes, who the man who she was promised to, after your mate killed her father in front of her.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, and this was also while, like, it was you were married to 7 or 8 other women.
Yeah, rival in love is an interesting way of channeling that.
Yeah, but he had money, so probably one official who just went, went with it.
Yeah.
And of course, by the time Jefferson escape was released, they had fled to Europe. So he had to do work and then follow them to Europe. And he almost caught them in Russia, and they'd gone to Paris. He almost caught them in Paris, and they went to Denmark.
And then when they get to London, he finally gets them.
Yeah, and then they go to London to them.
This man is committed.
Yeah, he's 20 years of following these like this, and of course through this he's also working. Well, he's got to earn a living. Well,
Yeah.
so he's picking skills as he goes, and it's during this time he acquires the poison alkaline substance that a professor demonstrated that would kill instantly, and it's where he decided that he would, with each of them, offer them a choice of 2 pills, one poison, one not. He would take the other, and he would let the great creator, God, decide who was the guilty man.
Of course, we've been saying it all through this. I'm blanking on the name of the second one.
Stangerson.
Yeah, of course, Stangerson doesn't go along with it and gets a knife for his trouble.
Yeah, he goes to attack Jefferson and gets a knife for his trouble, as you say.
Yeah.
Through the heart, and he leaves the pills behind. But he works as a cabbie, and brilliant way to just get around the city, get to know it, find the pills, be generally unobserved, and also grow his beard out.
Man knew what he was doing.
Yeah, and he followed them, but was never able to get them alone until the train, and then Enoch decided to go on his own, and he followed Enoch and kept outside as a cab because he got Enoch hailed him down to because he was being chased by an angry older brother with a cudgel.
Yeah.
So down, and he took Enoch to a liquor place. Basically, he took Enoch to all drinking holes he to go to, and then took the opportunity at the end of the evening to take him to an empty house whose key he had managed to make a copy of. The estate agent in charge of selling it had accidentally left in his cab earlier. And there he gets Drebber into the building and then starts getting impassioned. And he'd kept the ring with him the 20 years so that he would make sure that it was the last thing that Enoch saw. and also it was the only thing he had, losing the woman he loved.
Yeah. So obviously he wanted the ring back.
Yeah. So when he lost it, he came back and had to very quickly pretend to be drunk. But due to the aneurysm, passion, and understanding of medicine of the time, he got a nosebleed while explaining passionately to Enoch and seeing the man's fear, and then seeing the terror that went over him after taking the pill. There was and he'd realised he'd had the poison,
Yeah.
and following in that, he got his mate to try and get the ring back, and then he managed to get to Stangerson, who never left his room. He managed to find out what room he was in, get the ladder up against the window, open the window, go in, give the ultimatum, get attacked and stab the bug.
Yeah. And
and he confessed all of this to the coppers down at the station because
in the context of the story, John Watson had access to Lestrade's notes wherein he took down his confession exactly.
Yeah. And the police want to wait and let him explain it in court, as seemed to be the procedure at the time.
And he's quite candid about the fact it's like, I might not last that long, and he has Watson just lay a hand on his chest, and instantly he's like, "You've got an aortic aneurysm."
Yeah, because the description suggests that there's a whole steel band playing drums the way it's going in the middle of sort of a steampunk automaton war robot. It's just sort of like the heart is completely unnatural rhythm, going crazy, and figures it out.
And he indeed does succumb to it. He doesn't last. Doesn't he die the next day or something?
Yes, found dead the next day or the day of the trial. It's sort of, the language is a little.
I may have procrastinated on the reread. I read this last week, and then tried to read it again today to refresh myself. I only got to the end of the flashback.
Yeah. So Hope dies in prison, lying on the floor. Or with a smile on his face, because his one fear was that he would die before he completed the Lord's work. He said he had no doubt that if Stangerson had taken the poison, that he would been walking away and Stangerson would die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the story. There is a brief epilogue where Holmes and Watson just sort of debrief.
Yeah. Watson, Holmes bemoans a bit that Lestrade and Gregson are getting credit, and that he gets an ancillary mention as an amateur detective. And Watson is like, you should put your own accounts of the case out to the public. And Holmes goes, oh, no. And says, okay, fine, I'll do it for you.
And that is the in-universe explanation for these stories. And
which also explains sort of the perspective of how it's written in the narrative. It's because they're not by Conan Doyle. These books are by John Watson.
Yeah. And I find it really interesting that the first Sherlock Holmes story, for lack of a better term, villain is someone who is ultimately very sympathetic.
And also
Like,
that Sherlock doesn't appear in half of it.
yeah, yeah. And
The
well,
first Sherlock story, bold move to have your main character barely be there.
yeah. By the end of the story, I was like, yeah, that guy deserved his revenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just I don't know whether or not that was particularly controversial at the time. I've not looked into it, but you know, it's kind
Yeah.
of I do appreciate the not black and whiteness of that because like yeah, the guy had committed two murders, but you know, the story just doesn't just write him off as a criminal, which I think you would expect him to do, and indeed the one adaptation of this I'm familiar with kind of does.
Yeah. Oh, interesting fact I've just found, according to sort of Sherlock wiki style of thing, Lucy's actually older than Jefferson.
Oh,
Lucy is about 3 years older.
oh, cool.
So yeah, Lucy would have been 18 when she died. Jesus wept. If Lucy was 18 when she died, that meant Jefferson was 15 when they got engaged.
It really was a different time, wasn't
Oh,
it?
wow.
Yeah. Oof. Yikes.
Apparently, there could be as much as a decade wrong in that estimation. Wow. Yeah, he wouldn't have even been 40 when he was 36.
36 at time of death. Wow.
Apparently, this is that that feels like someone made a maths error somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, that doesn't quite feel believable, quite frankly.
That might have to have another look at the text and double check.
Yeah.
But
Now, um, because I'm reading it in a big book called The Complete Stories of Sherlock Holmes, when I got to the flashback chapter, I assumed that there's like they just apprehended Jefferson Hope, and then it moves on to somewhere else. I assumed that it had moved on to a new story. It's like, wait, they just catch the guy and that's it?
no explanation. Where's the motive? And then you realise the explanation of the motive is longer than everything else going on in the book.
Yeah, it's also my favorite part of the book, and I asked our mutual friend Seb to read it because I think he would particularly like it because not just because of the setting and the time period, but also um it put me in mind of one particular aspect of the book slash film Holes that we both like.
Mm-mm. No.
Yeah. I mean, we read that at school. I don't know if you did.
Yeah, we did. That was my first encounter with Shia LaBeouf
Yeah,
because
mine
he
too.
was
I think that was his first movie.
yeah. So it was probably everyone's first encounter.
Yeah, but the Jefferson Hope flashback, just the way he crashed her funeral, took the ring and left. It struck me like it put me in mind of the kissing Kate Barlow flashback from Holes, and it's like maybe a little bit of inspiration um Louis Sahar got from this. I don't know. I don't know whether Louis Sahar read Sherlock Holmes, but it made me think of that, and on that I recommended it to Seb, who,
Yeah.
and if he is watching this, I've just spoiled that for him.
To be
Well,
honest, if Seb is watching this, it's his own fault.
yeah, and we've spoilt the entire story in more detail than I expected to.
Yeah, so much so that we're nearly at the 2 hour mark.
Yeah, I mean, God, next time shall I just read it aloud ahead of the discussion?
No, because of course Ollie listens at a much higher speed and reads at a much higher speed than I do currently.
Yeah. Well, I speed up the audio version as quick as I can and try to read along with the text version as quick as I can, and doing both increases the speed with which you can do either, because both your eyes and ears are picking up the slack for each other.
Yes. Whereas my
Although
reading speed has been down.
any more than an hour of that and your brain will feel like you've stretched it over, like your brain will feel very spread thin at that point. You will have the you're gonna feel the effects.
You're going to feel like too little butter over too much bread, to borrow from Tolkien.
Yeah. Although that doesn't happen for about an hour in my estimation. Although in that time you can easily get through about 100 to 130 pages of manuscript.
Yeah. That's a little that's faster than my top speed used to be, but that was just reading alone. Which, granted, it was probably faster on things that weren't sort of semi-obscure 17th century Scottish dialects.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Confessions and Memoirs of a Justified Sinner, a tough book and a very long title.
My unaided reading speed is probably about a page a minute of standard page of manuscript.
Yeah. But the story is interesting. It's got a scientific bent to it, which is trying to ground itself in realism as opposed to other stories that would necessarily come out that had scientific that were a bit crazy.
Yeah. I very much prefer that method of writing genius characters to the one that often gets used, which I tend to refer to as brain magic, where the audience is just expected to accept that this person is super smart and it makes sense to them and it doesn't have to make sense to you.
Yes, a lot of Sherlock Holmes inspired characters suffer from the brain magic.
Yeah.
Which one of my favorite characters, Grand Admiral from Star Wars, who is so very obviously based on Sherlock Holmes that his smart nemesis' name is an
Is a what?
Moriarty. So his tactical nemesis, who appears in an earlier, his name is, I think, an anagram of Moriarty, possibly, or a vowel shifting. So it's like, oh, for God's sake. So that's Thrawn's rival. But yeah, by this point, when Sherlock Holmes came out, sort of like a grounding in proper science had probably seen good, because by this point, Frankenstein had been out for nearly 70 years. I can't imagine H.G. Wells particularly far in publishing.
And I really enjoyed how fully realized all the characters were. Like, so much was dedicated to John and Lucy Ferrier, who are footnotes in this story, like in the grand scheme.
Realistically, we know more about them than we do about Holmes and Watson.
Well, at this point, yeah, but we have many more stories with them to go.
Yeah, they're both dead. So their story doesn't really grow.
Yeah. And ancillary characters in the antagonist's flashback. And they are full characters, and I really like that.
Yeah, and it's just sort of like you do feel sympathy, Jefferson, and certainly Lucy.
Yeah.
That there is, I made reference to this earlier. I'll bring it. As I made reference to this, saying I'll bring it up later. I meant to bring it up earlier than this.
Yeah.
There is some pushback against the representation of Mormon and Mormonism from the time, to the extent that Brigham Young's grandson is involved in the pushback. Though they claimed Brigham Young's grandson, can't remember, that Conan Doyle privately apologized to them for the
No, he didn't.
Mormonism. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
No, he didn't.
Yeah, no.
Any apology Arthur Conan Doyle would have given for something said in his work to a public figure would have been public.
Yes.
I assume he said that after Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's death.
I believe so, yes.
Of course.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I believe Conan Doyle's daughter put out that Arthur's perceptions of Mormonism might be inaccurate because of the literature available at the time that talked about it, which was also very unflattering. But I
mean,
will
that is possible.
Yeah, but it's not an outright apology. And also, I think that is the latest three things on book: Brigham Young's grandson, Doyle's daughter or granddaughter.
Yeah.
I
mean, I find it interesting that Sherlock Holmes, he's described as being passionate about justice, even if he cares more about justice than he does about the law. So that there is definitely that line drawn there between what is legal and what is right. And we are definitely made to think about that in the first villain of this iconic series is someone who you can't really help but be on the side of.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, he dies at the end, but he got what he wanted. Well, he didn't get what he wanted. What he wanted was to marry Lucy. But, he
got his vengeance.
Yeah. And that's his consolation prize, I suppose, even if he spent his entire life getting it.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. I had one final point of the Mormons. I will get this out and then I will stop talking about.
No, go ahead.
It is it doesn't help Brigham Young's arguments about like that's a very unfair depiction of the Mormon chant, or Brigham Young's grandson argument, given how in many ways the Mormon church is worse than that nowadays.
I don't really know much about that, to be honest.
In sort of like in the ways of sort of like in the cultist control over its members. Like, for example, if an actual Mormon were to comment on this about there is a fair this and they're like talking about how I'm attacking Mormonism. There is a high % chance that they themselves will get in trouble for having encountered us, who are not Mormons, and spending time there and listening to our ideas, even if they're criticized. The Church of Latter-day Saints, they are also known, is very insular, and
yeah, I did get that vibe.
Yeah, and does not have a good reputation, and also they get frequently brought up whenever there's a document, just like constantly, because apparently they follow.
You broke up there. They get brought up
whenever there's a documentary about cults. The Church of Latter always brought. But yeah, no, because of course they follow a man who was given gold plates of solid gold with a New Testament written in Egyptian hieroglyphs that only he was allowed to see, and only the successive leaders of the Mormon church are allowed to see after.
Yeah.
Supposedly a New Testament following on from the Testament of Christ. So it's just sort of like, eesh. And of course, it was also dug up in the tree in America, from under a tree in America as well.
Yeah. I mean, naturally.
Naturally. Yeah, and like the supreme leader has obscene control, the church controls resources. I'm going to stop now because this is just going to turn into a rant.
Also, we've been going for over 2 hours, which I think, I mean, I was aiming for an hour or two as a sweet spot. I don't know how long these stories are, or how long we are going to spend discussing them, how much we're going to have to say, but like, I do think, yeah, this is probably a pretty good length, and it seems like, I mean, you've been breaking up a lot lately, so your Discord might be failing you.
God damn it, Discord!
Although, ironically, that came through very clearly. Yeah.
Of course it did.
Yeah. But, yeah.
It's
So, final thoughts, I guess. What is your impression of a study in Scarlet as a whole, now that we've gone through the plot? And...
yeah, I enjoy it. It's not as I expect in many ways, but I have been pleasantly surprised by it.
Yeah, me too. As I say, I really love how realised all the characters are.
Yeah,
um,
you get a feel for the world that they're in.
yeah, and again, there's a real theme of what the law of the land says versus what is actually right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's probably a shot across the bows occasion political satire that goes over everyone's heads nowadays.
Yeah.
But not so much. The satire of the cops are inefficient and idiots is eternal.
Yeah.
Well, because that satire just never ends.
Indeed.
And, yeah, it's really not had some good really.
Yeah.
That one.
Well, again, the only one that I'm expressly familiar with is A Study in Pink, the first episode of Sherlock, and that's a very loose adaptation. Now that I've read this one.
Yeah, though, have you figured out how the guy survives in it?
Sorry.
Have you figured out how the poison is always alive after they take the pills in A Study in Pink?
Well, yeah, it's the Princess Bride, isn't it? I always assumed.
Yeah, and it seems that Sherlock needs to get a bit of pop culture in him because he would have figured it out.
Yeah.
As it was, rather than risking it.
For anyone unfamiliar, in the Princess Bride, the way Wesley wins this same gambit is they're both poisoned, but I've spent years building up an immunity to this particular poison.
Yes. There's also a theory that when Visario goes to smell the poison to confirm that yes, it is scentless, that he actually gets a dose there. But I prefer the I have built up the poison. I prefer Wesley. I'm telling the truth. This is the woman I love.
Yeah. I don't think he would lie in that situation after he was already dead.
Yeah.
Uh,
But yeah, I enjoyed it. It's, as I say, it was unexpected, but it was well realized. And frankly, I've read stuff that is worse that have been written over a much longer period. So
yeah. Sherlock Holmes is presented as quite a jolly man, really, very eccentric, and
Yeah.
very enthusiastic about what he does.
Yes, though he does have his fugue state, which are described if it wasn't. He looked like he was hooked on some form of narcotic, which I would countenance if it wasn't for the temperate state of the rest of that he kept his affairs. So, is the common perception that Sherlock Holmes is actually, because of course this was also the great binge, where just like everyone drugs.
Yeah. uh,
Then again, given the man's passion for work, it would probably hinder him badly.
well, I don't know if this is actual canon or just cultural osmosis, but like, doesn't Holmes use cocaine or something?
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm not sure, but this first book does not do anything to confirm that.
Right.
Or at least Watson isn't observant to confirm it.
Yeah.
But we will see as we go on, because there are a lot more stories to go.
Yeah. Most of them shorter than this, so this episode will probably end up being a good deal longer than future ones.
Yeah, I think there's 4 novels total and a lot of short stories.
Yeah. So if we do one story per week,
Yeah, that should be manageable.
yeah, I wanted to do like a book club thing to get me reading and have someone to discuss what I'm reading with, because that's just fun.
Yeah.
And but I went with Sherlock Holmes for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it is like the British cultural export.
Along with A Christmas Carol.
Yeah, along with A Christmas Carol.
Not the rest of his work, just A Christmas Carol.
I mean, possibly Oliver Twist.
Yeah, that did become a large musical.
Yeah. But largely A Christmas Carol. But yeah, and Sherlock Holmes has inspired so much. I really think I should read it at some point. So this was a good excuse to do that. And also, the stories are short enough that I've got a reasonable chance of reading one a week in time for these episodes.
Yes. Yeah. And,
as I say,
and
sitting down to read is something I have difficulty getting myself to do.
yes, it's always hard.
Yeah, I've been working my way through Discworld for about 5 years now. Yeah. I'm on Lords and Ladies at this point, which oh, what number is that? Yeah, Lords and Ladies is the 14th Discworld book, though I have read a couple out of order.
Yes, that's still fairly good. It's
Yeah, but there are 41 of them.
yeah, there is always that.
But yeah, I figured Sherlock Holmes would be a quick, fun read that I could talk to, well, that I could discuss with my friend Dan, who we used to chat about what we were watching on TV for hours after Theatre Society.
Yes. Oh god, when the Arrowverse early.
Yeah, it was usually the events of the Arrowverse that week.
Yes.
To put that in a time frame.
Yeah. At one point, it was actually just Arrow.
Yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah. it was frequently bad, but I kind of miss those shows.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're getting very off track. I think that's a sign we've run out of things to say about this one.
Yes, but thank you for those to those of you who have either live or in the future. We hope you've enjoyed our ramblings
Yes,
and our somewhat clumsy retelling of the story.
yeah, yeah, that went into more detail than I expected. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I'm not good at doing detail like story summation scene. As demonstrated by my too long didn't read I sent to Hall for Frozic was still about 6 pages long.
I have a version of that problem as well, though, well, I won't say a version of that problem. I like to be clear and detailed as well.
Yeah.
So summary is not my strongest point. Seb has often told me to be more concise, but yeah, that it was good though. I should probably have marked this for spoilers because we've given all of them.
Yeah, here's the story. Here's every character's name we can and here's every major plot point that they do. Here's even detail about some of them, like they use a cudgel to threaten their person. And we say speak silently, speak quietly, and carry a big stick, but no need to carry a big stick. No, speak silently, quietly. Whatever, word's hard.
Yeah.
You can tell I've got an English degree. I have no mastery of the language.
Hey, I saw a post about that once. It's like authors when talking to people. It's like, and someone replies with, "Listen, do you know how much braining it takes to make words go?"
We burn it out when we sit in front of the screen and type.
Anyway, that's it from us. I think this was our basically a recap and some thoughts on A Study in Scarlet. And what is actually the second story?
The Sign of the Four.
The Sign of the Four.
Uh,
So join us next week for a discussion of The Sign of the Four. Hopefully a little better structured than this, and with a few more bells and whistles on the setup.
Possibly a crackling fire. Yeah, The Sign of the Four is the next one.
Yeah. And I'm Ollie Johnson, and he's been Dan Murgatroyd. We'll see you next week.
See you then.
Yeah.